Well, now it's Wednesday, the 3rd of January 2018, 9:27. I, Jake. I, ninth letter of the alphabet. 9. 3 nines, 27. 27 is the value of the name Jake. I, Jake. I, Jake, have a prophecy for twin volcanic eruptions in Indonesia on Sunday, the 7th of January 2018, which is only 4 days away. So, Mount Agung in Bali and Mount Sinabung in Sumatra, North Sumatra to be precise. And the time has just clicked onto 5:28 in Medan, North Sumatra in Indonesia, which is about there. Pretty close to where the big earthquake hit back in 2004 on Boxing Day. So, a part of the world that makes people nervous when things move under the ground, and rightly so. But these are all natural processes, and sometimes they just happen in a way that's deadly for humans and animals as well. So, if you could actually predict stuff like that, it would be really handy as far as saving lives goes. Bottom line is, these things tend to happen without too much warning when it comes to earthquakes and stuff like that. Australia tends to battle more with bushfires, and the last time I made a prediction for a volcanic eruption was for December 6th. And yeah, if we look at what happened on December 6th, there was actually wildfires in the United States, in California. And Donald Trump made an announcement to the world that the US had decided to recognize Israel as the capital city of Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel. I should not reverse that, should I? Israel, the capital city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, capital city of Israel. And I had made a prediction for a volcanic eruption on that day of Mount Agung, but also for a storm at Vaucluse in Sydney. And these photos are taken in Watson's Bay, which is just next to Vaucluse. Now this is a very Jewish part of Sydney, Vaucluse, and it includes Australia's most notorious suicide spot, which is here, at the Gap, and Australia's most notorious serial killer, most infamous, I guess, serial killer, Ivan Milat, actually faked his death from this very spot. When he was in trouble with the police, he decided to leave his sneakers on top of the Gap and then disappear over to New Zealand, which was quite a cunning plan, which left the police thinking he might have jumped. Ah, interesting. So yeah, Vaucluse, very much a Jewish part of Sydney, a very affluent suburb, and like a lot of places, when you just walk around and look at what's around, there's a lot of references to religion in the buildings, in the architecture, in the names of the streets, and the everything. Religion is everywhere. When you start walking around and just looking at things, it's surprising how many references there are to religion. And here's something that this number plate caught my attention, because the investigation into the backpacker murders was meant to be called AIR, Operation AIR, or Task Force AIR, EYRE, as in Lake Eyre. But someone put it as AIR by mistake, and then they just decided to leave it as AIR, AIR. So when I saw this number plate while walking around Vaucluse, it sort of caught my attention. And So yeah, the fact that I said I think there's going to be a big storm in Vaucluse, and I've mentioned how I was 13 years old in 1989 when I was approached by the aquarium man at Western Park in Canberra. I was 13. So it's funny how the first when I went and had a good walk around Vaucluse for the second time that I'd been there, I kept seeing a lot of things that sort of reflected back to me what my age that I was in 1989, and just different things, reflections. And like I say, everywhere you go, religion, religion, religion. This little ornament looks like some kind of Buddhist statue kind of thing. Yeah, religion's a weird thing, I think. I'm not religious. I was raised religious, but I reject religion. I forcefully reject religion because I don't like the hypocrisy of religion. Whether you're talking about Christianity, I was raised Catholic, but whether you're talking about... See, a lot of Catholics I know they're not interested in what the Pope says about refugees or about climate change. They've embraced more the conservative line that's more common in Australia, which is, climate change is just, it's just a bit of an international big kerfuffle over nothing. And refugees, well, they all go to Germany. Let them go to Germany, that kind of attitude. Yeah, I'm not real keen on that attitude, and the Pope actually has quite the opposite attitude, which is interesting. The way people seem to embrace the opposite of what the Pope is saying, but they still call themselves Catholic, and that's a pretty good example of religious hypocrisy, and that's why it's only the smallest of reasons as to why I'm not religious. Number 9. Yeah, so I saw there were no storms in Vaucluse on the 6th of December 2017. It was a Wednesday in 2017, the same as 1989. No storms in Vaucluse, but Donald Trump announced that he was going to recognize Jerusalem. He had decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel. A decision that has already led to some violence and a few people being killed. And now we've got violence in Iran. Iran obviously has a lot of problems. Yeah, it's interesting when you start seeing reflections of things. Just coincidental reflections. Rose. The rose is a big thing in The Dark Tower by Stephen King, so I noticed the name Rose when I saw it walking past the cemetery in Vaucluse. And bad boy equals 49. Jose equals 49. And Jose was the storm that hit on the 6th of September 2017, which was also a Wednesday. So Jose, 49, 6. Interesting. So yeah, as I was walking around this part of the world on that date, whatever day this was, when I went up to Vaucluse and wandered around, I kept seeing coincidences everywhere I looked, really. And a lot of people would say, oh, you sound like a waffling schizophrenic right now. I was born on the 27th. I was 13 in 1989. Jake equals 27. Oh, and look at that. Joyce. Irving is going to be the next tropical cyclone in Australian waters, and Irving is the one that I'm picking as the bad one. The next one after that will be Joyce, the J storm. And yeah, I think it will be Irving, will be the bad one for the year. Perhaps Joyce could be the twin, could happen at the same time as Irving, who knows? Jose was the 10 storm for the Atlantic. I noticed this too because Ralph Morris from Junee, died aged 9 in 1899, which can be rearranged as 1989. Jacob Wetterling, born on the 17th of February. My name's Phil, so yeah, I did notice this too. And my prediction is for the 7th of the 1st, the 7th of January 2018. Is it really about twin volcanic eruptions in Indonesia? Probably not. Probably not. Not likely. Again, 27th. Jean. Clarice. 1999. Aged 99. And like I was just saying, Ralph Morris died in 1899. And he died 99 days before what would have been his 10th birthday. Synchronicity. The Boy in the Dark Tower by Stephen King. His last name is Chambers. And two of the girls who died in the Black Saturday bushfires were Penny and what were their names? Penelope and Melanie, I think, Chambers from Kinglake. Rose is a huge thing in the Dark Tower, the rose that's found by Jake Chambers in the vacant lot. And I was strongly reminded of the vacant lot in the Dark Tower as I walked around this cemetery. You can probably see why. 69 and 51. Boy, Jake equals 69. Angelic equals 51. Reflections, coincidences. If you notice coincidences, you might have schizophrenia. I thought maybe you were just observant if you notice coincidences, because from what I can gather, there are coincidences all the time. I was born in 1976. That's a fact. I don't think me saying, oh, there's the date that I was born, makes me a schizophrenic, does it? I wouldn't think so. No. A child. Child Jesus, very different to the man Jesus, I think. It's like religion minus the hypocrisy of religion. Religion with an honest heart. I've never really checked out what it says on this. Bit hard to read. Obviously very young. Very worn, very old grave for a child. And the street in the background here is Tower Street. Tower Street, Vaucluse. A very Jewish suburb, very affluent. Even a vacant lot here would be worth a fortune. This vacant lot, one of Australia's oldest cemeteries, well, that would be priceless. Like I said, a huge difference between the child Jesus and the adult Jesus, which for me has become a symbol of hypocrisy and lies and child abuse and all kinds of stuff, that slavery even. Slavery in the name of God, abuse in the name of God, control. And that's really reflected in the attitude of the Australian federal government towards refugees. The Australian Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, Peter Dutton. I mean, what a horrible attitude he has towards refugees. 1889, the year that Ralph Morris died in Junee. August 6. Ralph didn't die on August 6, he died on February 8. Yeah, Ralph died on February 8, 1899. Ten weeks after he was burned by his boss. And speaking of people being burned, there were people that burned themselves, tipped flammable liquid over their selves and set themselves alight because they'd been held in detention centres, offshore detention centres for a very, very long time, over 3 years. And Peter Dutton, the guy I just mentioned, Australia's Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, who calls himself a Christian, his response was that they had done it because they were incited to do it by lefties. That was his response to people burning themselves to death. And that's what when I use the word hypocrite, that's what I'm talking about. And when I say the adult Jesus Christ, to me is just a symbol for hypocrisy and lies. That's what I mean. Hypocrisy, lies. And worse than hypocrisy and lies, cruelty. Cruelty. Cruelty in the name of religion. There's been so much of it in the past, and it's still happening today. Felix is a pretty cool name though. 28. Well, December 6, 2017 was 28 years since the Aquarium Man approached me at Western Park in Sydney. And I wrote about that in my application. I did a partner visa application last year. And I wrote about what happened to me when I was 13. And I said in my application that if the Australian government... Now, I knew Peter Dutton's homophobic, so I didn't think I had much chance of my application getting processed. But I decided to give it a shot anyway. And it was 28 years last year, that was what I was going to say. 28 years since the Aquarium Man approached me at Western Park. 28 years also since Jacob Wetterling was abducted and murdered in Minnesota. And that was on Sunday the 22nd of October, 1989, and again in 2017, same calendar year. 1919. 19, the keystone number in the Dark Tower by Stephen King. And what I was going to say is, yeah, I said that I described what happened to me when I was 13. Not only did I have an encounter with someone who I knew much later was a predator, sexual predator, maybe a serial killer, I don't know. But a bad person, someone you don't want to run into, someone you certainly don't want to get into the car with. And I said if I did tell my teacher the next day what happened, and his response at the time was not the response that you'd hoped for. But problem was my mind had blocked out what had happened, so I couldn't really tell him what had happened, so I don't actually blame my teacher, but his response wasn't real helpful. Did you get the number plate? Why didn't you come and tell me this yesterday? Kind of stuff. Not really helpful stuff. And a silver Mercedes. I'm pretty sure the car that approached me and some other kids at Western Park back in 1989 was a silver Merc, or it could have been white. Lighthouse Lodge. So yeah, I described in detail what happened to me when I was young, the way I was let down by the adult authority at the time in my life, and again by the police when I went to the police later on. The response of the police officer, the first cop that I went and spoke to, after having, and I did have a couple of beers before going to the police because I needed to pluck up the courage. And so obviously you could smell the beer on my breath, and the cop's response was, "So how many drinks have you had tonight, sir?" And I don't think, if anyone ever goes to a police station or to a teacher or to any authority figure and to report that they were kidnapped as a kid, or that they think they were kidnapped as a child, then I think whoever that adult person is needs to be very careful how they react, because while seeing a counsellor, my counsellor said, actually, the original trauma from being abused or from whatever happens to you, which can be very traumatic, is obviously a big trauma if you get sexually assaulted or whatever. Just as bad, just as significant is if you tell, the first person you tell, if their reaction is not a good reaction, if their reaction is to disbelieve you or put the blame on you, that can be just as traumatizing as the actual assault. And so I said to Immigration and Border Protection, I said, you know, if you guys betray me, I'm not going to take it well. If you betray my trust, because I'm trusting you in making this application, paying $7,000 application fee, pouring out my heart and soul about my private life and everything that has happened to me and all the betrayal that I've suffered in the past. And I also talked about the bullying I copped at the start of high school, which happened in the quadrangle and right outside the chapel. Actually, a couple of the guys who bullied me threw me into the brick wall of the chapel, which is also the place I went and hid in at recess so that they couldn't find me. And that was probably 7 or 8 months before I had my run-in with the aquarium man at Weston Park on the shore of Lake Billy-Griffin, about half a k from where the picnic was. We'd gone for a bit of a walk, and that's something I didn't even figure out until many, many years later, the fact that we actually had walked half a k from where the picnic was. I wrote pages. When I say I wrote pages, my application to Immigration and Border Protection of Australia was well over 1,000 pages. I spent over $1,500 on printing. I spent days and weeks getting statutory declarations from all my family members and friends, acquaintances. It's great that Australia has recognised same-sex marriage, and I think it's great that the person who suggested the postal survey was Peter Dutton, because he thought the answer would come back as a no. The answer actually came back as a fairly convincing yes, and now same-sex marriage is legal. So that blew up in Peter Dutton's face. That plan by that homophobic, racist bully of a man blew up in his face, just like a party popper at a gay wedding. And tell you what, I'd pay $7,000 just to see that happen. So there is sometimes some justice in the world against bullies, racists, bad people. And it astounds me, I have to say, that Malcolm Turnbull, in some sort of weird attempt to seem tough and to maintain the support of the Australian people, who a lot of whom don't seem to have much time for refugees, he's made Peter Dutton probably the most powerful, single most powerful politician in Australia, soon to be the head of Homeland Security. American style, yes, let's just copy America down another path. Yet another path of stupidity. As if we haven't followed America down enough paths of stupidity already. Let's follow them down another one. So yeah, that was my walk around Vaucluse in Sydney. And I'm trying to think, when was this? Ah yeah, it was going back to, I think I took all these photos on the 27th of January 2010, which was about a week before I discovered who Jacob Wetterling is. Yeah, it was. And it was a few months after I discovered who Jacob Wetterling is. Who Jacob Wetterling is. It was a couple of weeks after I discovered who Jake is. A couple of months after that the big volcano went off in Iceland. And then I discovered the name of that volcano, which is a very hard name to pronounce, had the same value as Jake's name. And so I sort of drew a connection between Jake and volcanoes. And then it wasn't till 2012, in the week leading up to Jake's birthday in 2012, that I came to connect Jake. And I just noticed Wilson. Nathan Breeze, his mum's surname was Wilson. Tina Wilson was one of the people who died on Black Saturday. And I actually said to immigration, when they wouldn't let my partner come even for a visitor visa, they just ignored our application for 3 months. It was meant to be a 30-day processing time. And after 90 days, I said, listen, if you guys are going to discriminate against me and bully me and basically use these tactics that I had become very well used to from homophobes, they never want to say they're homophobes. But obviously they show their homophobia by doing things like that. Let's just not process this application, let's just leave it. And I said, if you don't do it, if you don't treat me fairly, I'm going to make a prophecy against you. And I'm going to break your hypocritical stranglehold on Australia. I said I will. And I said I will predict a bushfire. I will predict a bushfire like the tragedy that happened on Black Saturday. Because not only are you people racists and homophobes, and I know Malcolm Turnbull's not homophobic, but Peter Dutton most definitely is. And it's great that he had to, his plan blew up in his face and he had to vote for same-sex marriage. I think that's fantastic. Absolutely awesome. 29 is the value of the word black. Black equals 29. So Black Saturday, the fires that killed Nathan and his family. Tina Wilson was his mum. Tegan Hames was his little 5-6-year-old sister. It was a monastery right across from the house they died in, which was number 9 on Pine Ridge Road in Kinglake West, Victoria. A place that still has poor phone reception, poorly maintained roads, both things that contributed to the deaths of a lot of people that day. Nathan and his family spent hours upon hours, and I mean from 1 p.m. through until around 4 p.m. they were trying to evacuate. Then they were told, probably the safest place to be is in your own home. So they returned home, and they ended up fleeing next door when the firestorm hit with unbelievable ferocity, because Kinglake West was right in the path of one of the worst firestorms ever to rage in Australia. And they fled next door, where they died with 5 other people who were in the house next door to them. And total tragedy. Nobody should ever spend hours trying to evacuate only to then die in a disaster, in a firestorm. I mean, there should have been someone telling them how to get out of there and directing them down a road that should have been open and safe to travel. But now, 9 years on from that disaster, nothing's changed. The media still hypes up minor weather events. And, you know, I saw the word catastrophic yesterday attached to a small fire in Tasmania, which was not burning under even severe conditions. Maybe severe at worst. I don't think it was even severe. And yes, there was an emergency warning issued for the fire, but that's really common. And so the media hypes these things up. You've got a government that likes to just whether it's Liberal or Labor. I mean, I went to my Labor candidate. My local Labor candidate is Mike Kelly in Queanbeyan. I went to his office to say, you know what, immigration, they rejected my application, but the worst part of it is they didn't even notify me that they had rejected the application. So I went for all through 2017 not knowing what the outcome was. And I got so frustrated that I ended up offending my partner because I accused him of not caring, and I was wrong what I said to him, and he got offended. But that's only because immigration had already delayed and put us through hell for too long, and I finally cracked, as you do. And so my partner wasn't talking to me at the time. I uploaded a statement saying my partner stopped talking to me, I've offended him. They immediately processed the application then, immediately, and completely rejected it and said, and they rejected everything. They didn't recognize our relationship as being genuine at all. Not even in the slightest bit, and that was really hurtful. And by the time my partner and I, by the time he sent me the decision, the 70 days had passed. Looks like it's going to be quite a decent little low pressure system hitting New Zealand around the 5th of January, which is a couple of days before the date I flagged. Then it's going to be really hot weather on the 6th of January through Adelaide and Melbourne. In fact, if we look at the forecast for Melbourne, it's almost a little reflection of the Black Saturday forecast in a way, because you've got the temperature just suddenly booming up to 41 degrees on Saturday. And this is something that's happening more and more often these days with global warming, which is why I think it was disgusting when Peter Dutton was standing there with Scott Morrison and Tony Abbott, and he's sort of making jokes about sea level rising. And the joke was about Pacific Islands going underwater. I thought that was totally disgusting. Considering Australia, Tony Abbott and Australia, a lot of Australians decided to start making fun of climate change as a topic straight after Black Saturday, straight after Nathan Breeze and his family were killed along with 169 other people on Black Saturday. I just thought, wow. So this is the day before the date that I flagged. That's been the date when there's going to be a sign. Saturday, the 6th. Interesting, because the boy Irving, who I've talked about, was born on the 6th of September, and his birthday coincided with Jose, Hurricane Jose, which I had made a prediction for last year. Nathan Breeze died on Saturday. Black Saturday was the 7th. This coming Saturday is the 6th of January. Jake died on the 22nd. And 41. Pretty hot. But not as hot as 46, which was the temperature on Black Saturday. So we might just have a little look at what are they forecasting in terms of fire danger for this period that I'm talking about.
Perhaps even an extreme fire danger for the Gascoyne coast.
I might have to give this some volume.
With that high moving into the Tasman Sea, we'll start to see a northerly airstream developing on Friday. Note the isobars are spaced apart. The winds will be quite light on Friday, so it's unlikely we'll have any fire weather warnings on Friday, maybe just 1 or 2 districts in South Australia. But the key period here will be Saturday. Ahead of a front, those isobars squeezing together on Saturday. The winds will pick up. They'll average even around 40 kilometres per hour. We'll have low humidity. And at this stage, we're expecting severe to extreme fire dangers, the orange and the red, for southern parts of South Australia and western and central parts of Victoria. So fires will be fast moving and difficult to control if they are burning through the southeast this weekend.
So there you go. If there's fires on Saturday, they will be potentially quite serious, potentially deadly. And that's why I personally take climate change seriously, and I agree with the Pope. Even though I'm not religious, I agree with the Pope when he says it's important issue, and it's one that you need to address, or at least take really seriously, and start thinking like in terms of how can we combat it, not just saying, oh, it's a lefty issue, because it's not a lefty issue. Climate change affects everyone. So this is Canberra, looking ahead over the coming week, and the dates I have flagged, well, the date is Sunday, which is going to be the hottest one for Canberra, and sort of staying fairly warm even after that. And Adelaide too. Adelaide's going to have a hot one come Saturday. Very hot and sunny, 41 degrees, so the same temperature as Melbourne. So yeah, I guess you can tell by now that I'm not a fan of politics in general. Like I said, I went to my local member, Mike Kelly, and I spoke to his immigration person, and she just made excuses for immigration and border protection. She just said, oh well, it's up to the person to check their inbox, including their junk folder. Problem is, I wasn't sent any notification at all of the decision, and when I asked, am I entitled to a refund, I wouldn't think so. And just so cold. They are so cold, they are so uncaring. I've decided come the next election I'm not going to vote for either major party. I'm totally disgusted with politics in Australia, and yeah, I'm just not going to vote for any of them. I think they're disgusting. Horrible people. I described them to someone, I mean, they just play politics with every issue, and I described Australia's politicians to someone recently as, or the major parties, in Australia especially. America's the same though. It's like bad eggs piled on top of bad eggs. So there's no one you can really go to sort out an issue, because if you're not dealing with one bad egg, you're dealing with another bad egg, and it's like, well, my answer is, come the next election, I'm just not going to vote for any of them. I'm going to leave my ballot paper blank. I will vote in the House, in the Senate, but it won't be for either major party, I can tell you. So yeah, that's my thoughts on things after being really treated horribly by the government in 2017, after being what I would describe as probably the worst and most cruel treatment that I've ever had in my life from anyone, has been at the hands of the Australian government in 2017. And I would say I've been treated even worse by them, even more cruelly, than by the guy who approached me at Western Park in Canberra when I was 13. And I say that because he was acting on impulses that were probably hard for him to resist. If he was a sexual predator, he obviously felt the urge to go and do something to some young person as a way to show his power, to feel power over somebody. And if that's a sexual urge, I can kind of understand someone being driven by that. And, especially in a society that back in 1989, people could not be openly gay, so you did end up with people becoming predators who otherwise may not have been. And speaking of Belanglo, Clark was the name of one of the victims in the Belanglo murders. That's a fact. The fact that I noticed a street sign says the same name, spelt the same way, I don't think that makes me a schizophrenic, does it? I mean, the street sign exists, the victim existed, Caroline Clark, Joanne Walters, they were victims of a serial killer. And Macquarie is the name of the lighthouse up there in Vaucluse. It's also the name of the university, Macquarie University in Sydney. Yeah, I feel really disillusioned with the Australian government and with the authority in general. And I definitely won't be voting at the next election. There's nothing that's going to change my mind on that. and I would encourage... I don't think you're allowed to encourage people not to vote, actually, so I better not do that. But my personal choice will be to not vote. I'm going to leave my ballot paper. My ballot paper will be blank, and that will be my vote of no confidence in the Australian, in both major parties, Labor and Liberal. I'm sick of them playing politics with everything. And I'm sorry, but the day you reject a partner visa application that I've put literally over 1,000 hours into, I think if you put my total application together, it would have been well over 1,000 pages. And to just reject that without even acknowledging the relationship is really cruel. Cruel to the extreme. And it's something I'll never forget. I don't understand the motive for governments being so cruel. Like I said, a sexual predator, I guess they've been born with, I don't know, something wrong with them. But governments supposedly are made up of people that are high functioning, highly capable, people capable of feeling empathy, you would think. Apparently not. They're not. I think government just attracts psychopaths who are every bit as bad as the guy who approached me when I was 13. And people say, oh, well, he must have really fucked up your life. And I'm like, well, actually, not really. It was more the homophobic attitude of the society that I grew up in when I was young, which has thankfully changed. Australians have rejected that old, religious, homophobic attitude. And that's why Peter Dutton's plan blew up in his face. Like I say, it blew up like a party popper at a gay wedding, and that is fantastic. And yeah, when it comes to people that do the wrong thing by me, yeah, I can be a little bit vengeful. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I don't think Jacob or Nathan see anything wrong with that either. And that's why they've helped me put a prediction together. I would urge you to remember that maybe when I talk about volcanoes, I may actually be alluding to bushfires. Because you've got to be very careful if you start talking about bushfires to the authorities in Australia. They might turn around and say, oh, are you planning to go light a bushfire? That might be their response. Rather than, oh, are you trying to save lives? Because they don't... I think most of what government does is for the purpose of perception. The perception they care. But the way they've treated me in 2017 has allowed me to see they don't care about people at all.